Good evening and welcome to the loft here in the Fisherman's cottage at the museum. My name's Sheila and I'm going to tell you a story, a magical story about a fisherman and his wife. The kind of story that would be told round a fireside on cold winter evenings here in Fife. Once upon a time, not in my time or your time, but in somebody's time, there was a fisherman called Davy. This is probably him sitting beside me. He stayed in a wee house right down on the coast with his wife Ella. Well, they were a hard-working couple, this pair. Davy would be out day after day in all weathers, casting and catching if he could. And Ella, well, she was hard working too, because not only did she have to look after the house and knit the gansies, she also had to clamber out of the rocks and gather the mussels and help Davy use them to bait the lines. But like many another fisherman's wife, there was another job Ella had to do. You see, Davy's boat was quite big and he couldn't pull it right up onto the beach. So you had to leave it a wee bit off the shore. And so it was Ella's job to carry Davy on her back out to the boat and then pick him up again and bring him back. And why did she do that? Well, it was all to do with her baits. The fishermen's boots were made of fine leather, and the salt water would spoil them, and it would take a lot of work to bring them back again, rubbing goose grease into them. And so to keep them dry, a fisherman's wife would carry him out to his boat and bring him back in again. Well, I said that Davy and his wife were a hard-working couple, and they were. But Davy, well, he wasn't very lucky. He wasn't very lucky with the fishing. He hardly ever caught more than 1 or 2 fish. And that didn't please Ella. She was always nagging at him. You need to find somewhere else to fish. You need to catch more fish. We can't manage with just 1 or 2 fish. We've never only any left to sell. And on like this she would go. So one day, when Davy went away fishing, he decided that he wasn't going to come home until he had a whole basket full of fish, because he wanted to please his wife. Well, he rowed out to a bit where he usually stopped, and Ella had helped him bait 3 lines. Each one had 80 hooks on it, with a mussel on each hook, and each hook had tied on the line by a horsehair. Well, he cast out the first line, and he waited and he waited and he waited, and when he thought enough time had passed, he began to put it in again. But there wasn't any fish on it. All the bait had gone. The fish had been fly. They'd nibbled all the bait. But none of them had been caught. So he moved a wee bit further up the coast and he tried again with the second line. And after a while he pulled it in, but exactly the same thing had happened. All the bait was gone, but there was no fish. So he decided he would go a wee bit further than he'd ever gone afore, to a bit where he hadn't fished afore. And he cast out the third line. And he waited and he waited and he waited for quite a long time, until the sun was nearly gone down. And then he began to pull it in. But was there any fish? Nah, not a one. But when he got to the end of the line, he realised it was caught in something. So he gave it a sharp tug. And into the boat with the line came a big clump of glistening seaweed. And when he tried to clear it, he found that the seaweed was covering over a big boulder. Well, he untangled the line and he was going to pick up the boulder and the seaweed and throw it back out the side when he heard a clink. And when he investigated, he found that tied onto that boulder there was a bottle. A bottle like he'd never seen afore. A glass bottle with strange markings on it. And it had a stopper in it that was all tied on with string. Well, he got rid of the boulder and the seaweed and he had a good look at the bottle. But he couldn't see inside. He gave it a shake. And he thought he heard a squeak. Well, curiosity got the better of him. And he got his knife and he prized out the stopper. And he peered inside, but he still couldn't see anything. And then, to his surprise, smoke began to come out of the bottle. A thin wisp of white smoke to start with. But as the smoke rose higher and higher into the air, it began to get darker and darker. And then, to Davy's amazement, this smoke began to turn itself into a sort of strange crater. A strange creature. And as he stared into the boat, he could see 2 big muckle feet, with only 4 toes on each, took up nearly the heel of the bottom of the boat. And as he looked up, there was 2 big, thick legs the size of tree trunks, dressed in a pair of green breeches. And further up, there was a big blue sash tied round a saggy waist, a big belly spilling out. And there was a plaid, half it round a pair of big wide shoulders, with 2 arms and hands the size of dinner plates. And there was only 4 fingers on each hand. And as he looked further up, he could see a long beard and a big head with 2 staring in, and a mouth full of tombstone teeth set in red raw gums. Well, Davy was a wee bit feared, to say the least, and he was even more feared when this crater boomed out in a big voice. "Well, Fisherman, thank you for rescuing me. Now, if you get me back to the shore as quick as you can, there'll be a reward for you." Well, Davy wasn't very sure, but he grabbed the oars and he began to row back towards the shore as fast as he could. And it wasn't easy, because this big creature in his boat was threatening to tip it over. And the creature kept calling at him, "Fisherman, Fisherman, hurry up, afore the wind tips us both out into the water." Well, soon Davy was back at the shore and he leapt out of the boat. Didn't he have any thoughts about getting his boots wet this time? He was up that beach to where his wife was standing waiting. Well, you would have thought that Ella, seeing this big crater in the boat, would have run and hid, but she didn't. She just stood there and folded her arms and says, "Who are you? And where are you come fae?" Well, the creature stood up to his full height, his head almost touching the clouds, and says, "I am a genie." And I have come for the bottom of the sea, where I've been inside a bottle, lying there for 500 years. I fell out with my master. You might have heard of him, because he came for Fife Day. Michael Scott, the Wizard of Balwearie. He had a castle further round the coast at Kirkcaldy. Well, I fell out with him that bad that he threw me into the sea after he'd put me in a bottle. And there I've been for 500 years. But now you've rescued me. Well, I have, says Davy, and you promised me a reward, didn't you? Aye, I did, said the genie. I did that. Well, for the first 200 years, I promised myself that whoever rescued me would hae all the gold and silver and jewels in the world. But nobody came to rescue me. So the second 200 years, I promised myself that whoever rescued me would get 3 wishes. And so they could hae their heart's desire. But still nobody came and rescued me. So I began to get in a bad temper about this. And so for the last 100 years, I've been promising myself that whoever rescued me, I would get them and I would chop them up and I would put them in the bottle and throw them out to sea, so they would ken what it was like. What, said Davy? You can't do that. That's no fair. I rescued you. That's nae reward. Ah, well, it's how it's got to be, because a promise is a promise, even if it is made to yourself. So you better say goodbye to your wife. Well, Ella stood there and folded her arms in again and says, you ken what, Genie? You're a great, big, powerful creature, and I didn't suppose we could do anything to stop you if that's what you want to do. But answer me this. You say you came out of a bottle. It must be a naughty big bottle to had you, because you're a gay big creature, aren't you? But I didn't see any bottle. What is it? I've never seen a big bottle like that afore. The fisherman's got the bottle, said the genie. Look, he has it in his hand. Well, Ella looked at the bottle and she looked at the genie and says, that's a lie. You're no telling me you came out of that wee bottle. Definitely no. I didn't believe you. I didn't believe you. You're telling tales. Yes, I did. No, you didn't, said Ella. You're some creature that lives at the bottom of the sea with the fishes. No, I'm no, said the genie. I didn't live at the bottom of the sea with the fishes. I didn't want to be there. No, I'm a genie that has lived in castles and palaces, and I've worked for sultans and kings. No, I'm telling you the truth. I came out of that bottle. Well, I didn't believe you, said Ella. Well, it looks like I'm going to have to prove it, said the genie. Fisherman, had up the bottle. So the fisherman held up the bottle again, and the genie began to shake and shiver and quiver until he turned once again into smoke, and he poured himself into the bottle. Quick, said Ella, stick the stopper back in. So Davy did. Now, they said, now we can throw you back out to the sea where you belong. Well, when he said that, the noise that began to come out of that bottle was nobody's business. The genie began to screech and scream and plead and yell. Oh, didn't send me back to the bottom of the sea, please, didn't send me back to the bottom of the sea, please, didn't do that. I promise I'll be good. I was only kidding, you ken. I was only kidding about chopping you up and putting you in there. It was just a joke. I didn't mean it, honest. Well, Davy looked at Ella and Ella looked at Davy and they nodded at each other. And so Davy took the stopper back out of the bottle. And immediately, whoosh, the genie appeared before them again. But this time, he took hold of the bottle and he smashed it on the rocks. Well, Davy and Ella were a wee bit worried now. But they needn't be worried, because the genie said, "Go and get your net and a bucket and follow me." So they did. They followed the genie all the way up the coast until they came to a big cave set into the cliffs. And they followed him right into the cave, right to the back of it, where there was a pool full of muddy, murky water. And Ella and Davy peered into this pool, and there they saw fish swimming about. Fish like they'd never seen afore. Fish that were all the colours of the rainbow. There were red ones and yellow ones and green ones and orange ones and purple ones and violet ones. And the genie said, "Come here once a day and catch as many fish that'll fit in your bucket. And that fish will serve you well. That pool, the fish in that pool will serve you well." And so Davy put his net into the pool and drew out a few fish to put in his bucket. And the genie said, "Now I must leave you. But didn't think too badly of me. I was in a terrible bad temper when you rescued me. So I really didn't mean you only heard him." And with that, the ground opened up and the genie disappeared. And Ella says, "You know, I ken somebody who'll pay us handsomely for these fish. We'll take them to the laird. He's travelled the world and he likes to taste different foods." So they did. They took the bucket of the fish to the laird and he paid them handsomely for them. And with the money they went to the market and they bought some food and some new clays and a few bits and pieces that they were needing. And the laird took the fish to his cook and said, "We'll hae them for your supper the night. Fry them in a wee bit oil with some herbs." And so the cook took the fish and she got out a big skillet and she put it on the fire and poured in some oil and a few herbs. And soon the fish were sizzling away. And when they were cooked on one side, she turned them over. But while they were cooking on the other side, she moved away from the fire to do something else. And when she came back, the fish were lying amongst the ashes, burnt to a crisp. Well, the pear cook was horrified, and she went to find the laird and tell him she didn't ken what had happened. He said, "Not a worry, they would just hae bacon and egg for their supper that night." And Ella and Davy had promised to bring another bucket of fish the next day, so they would try again. But the laird thought, "There's something funny going on here." So the next day, as promised, Ella and Davy brought another bucket of fish to the laird. And once again he paid for them and he gave them to the cook. And she put them in the skillet with oil and a wee bit of oatmeal this time. And they began to sizzle and sizzle. But the laird and the cook, they stayed in the kitchen watching. And when the first one side was cooked, she turned them over and they stepped back. And to their surprise, as they watched, a door appeared in the wall. And through that door came the bonniest lassie the laird had ever seen. She was dressed in a short tunic that looked as if it had been made out of a sack. And she had long flowing hair, big earrings in her ears and silver bangles on her arms. and she was carrying a long stick with a pointed end. And she went over to the fire and she mumbled something. Couldn't hear what she was saying. And then she took the stick and she tipped the fish out of the pan into the ashes where they burnt to a crisp. And then she turned round and she disappeared back through the door, and the door disappeared. Well, the cook fainted. And the laird says to himself, aye, I kent there was something strange about thee fish. Well, when he'd seen that the cook was all right and reassured her that he was happy enough with bacon and eggs for his tea again, off he went to find Davy and Ella, to ask them where the fish had come from. Well, Davy and Ella didn't want to mention the genie, but they promised that they would take the laird to the cave the next day and show them the pool where the fish had come from. And that's what they did. They took the laird the next day to the cave and showed him the pool. But as they were doing so, must have been the time of day, because the sun shone straight into the cave and lit up the back wall. And there they could see a carving in the wall. The carving of a beautiful young lassie with long hair and earrings and bangles, carrying a long pointed stick. And the laird says, oh my, that's the lassie I saw in my kitchen. And he reached out to touch the beautiful face. And as he did so, they heard a gurgling and a slurping behind them. And when they turned round, the pool had drained away into the earth, leaving a patch of dried mud. But lying on top of the mud, there were 4 fish. But no ordinary fish, because these fish were made of gold and silver, with diamonds and rubies for een. Well, Davy and Ella didn't ken what the laird was going to do. They thought he would probably take the fish for himself. But he didn't. He said they could have 2 and he would have 2. But Davy and Ella kent that they couldn't take the fish and sell them anywhere, because folk would think that they'd stolen them. So they agreed that the laird would take them and sell them and share the proceeds with them. And that's what he did. He sold 3 of the fish and gave the money that he got for 2 of them back to Davy and Ella, and they were set up for life. But the 4th fish, he wrapped up in a fine piece of silk and put it at the back of a drawer in one of the rooms in his big house, just in case that bonny lassie ever came back for it. But as far as I know, she never did. And that's the story of the fisherman and the bottle. A story I heard a long time ago for a traveller, but a story that probably travelled itself from far across the sea, from the land of the Arabian Nights. Thank you for listening, and good night.